Hello everyone, I'm here today in the Charles Perkins Centre where I'm about to interview Professor Stephen Simpson, who is the Academic Director here in the CPC and also a Professor within the School of Life and Environmental Sciences.
I was born a biologist. From an incredibly young age, was fascinated by particularly insects, but basically anything. I grew up in Melbourne. I had parents who encouraged my love of the outdoors and helped me collect insects. So really from an incredibly young age, I was born a biologist. It was a vocation for me. Yeah,
so your love of insects has actually taken you through, and it's one of the big research areas that you currently do, is that correct?
Well, my entomological life was really throughout my graduate, my postdoctoral, ultimately my academic career until probably the last 5 years, where I've become very much more medical in orientation. So my work in insects has really quite directly influenced everything I've done more recently, although it's now very much more dedicated in aspects to do with human health. So directing the Charles Perkins Centre. Charles Perkins Centre is a massively multidisciplinary enterprise, but it was quite literally built on principles that came from studying evolutionary biology and ecology. And in all sorts of ways, it sounds kind of weird, but my research in my earlier career, looking at, for example, things like swarming in locusts, the principles that have come out of that work have informed the way we've designed the Charles Perkins Centre. It is a great big swarm of locusts of sorts.
Or a beehive. So can you tell me a little bit about the research you did called the geometric framework?
Yes, so the geometric framework is a nutritional framework, which is actually the first theoretical framework for the study of nutrition. Now, nutrition has a history which is either in the animal production industries, sort of agriculture, how you grow healthy chickens or cattle or sheep or salmon or whatever, or in human health through dietetics, how you understand the relationship between diet and health. Neither of those had taken account of evolution or ecology in the way that they conceived or thought about nutrition. And David Robenheimer, a colleague of mine of very long standing, we worked together initially in Oxford, and he's now at the Charles Perkins Centre here. We devised a way of conceptualising and thinking about nutrition, which admits several things. Firstly, that nutrition touches and shapes all aspects of biology, and it actually intersects all aspects of human health and has global impacts in terms of, trade and all the things that we do as nation states. They're also in a very fundamental way driven by nutrition. We also appreciated that the standard way of thinking about nutritional issues, for example in human health, is too simplistic. So when we're looking for a cause for obesity, should we just blame it on sugar or should we just blame it on fat? Those are the wrong ways of answering a complex question, because after all, nutrition is about mixtures. We all, like any other organism, require dozens of different nutrients in appropriate quantities and ratios. They come packaged together as foods. We choose and eat foods, as do all animals. We mix foods into meals, meals into diets, and the diets ultimately determine our intake of nutrients, which then directly impact our health, performance, reproduction, evolutionary fitness. So how do you actually conceive of that in a way that's more encompassing and sophisticated than just looking at one thing at a time? Well, that's what the geometric framework set out to do. So it's a fundamentally Darwinian ecological perspective on nutrition, and it takes the perspective that all animals are faced with a multi-nutritional, multi-dimensional challenge, which is to try and track our way through this multidimensional landscape to attain optimal outcomes. Now, what you need to be able to do that is to have mechanisms that allow you to detect when you're deficient in particular nutrients and have too much of others, to make appropriate food selection decisions, to balance your diet over time in a way which ultimately has appropriate outcomes, ultimately in terms of evolutionary fitness. Now, what we realised was that if you look at animals that have evolved in their natural environment, they're actually pretty good at doing this. They can make really quite sophisticated nutritional decisions. And in our initial work, which was on locusts and other insects, we showed that they have the capability to know when they're deficient, let's say, in protein or carbohydrate or fat. And when that's the case, they make appropriate food choices to rebalance their diet. And then we set about trying to understand the mechanisms involved in doing that, which led us deep into the nervous system, trying to understand how taste systems work and how learning of nutritional circumstances and state works, and how the physiology of behavioural control and appetite works. And then we took those experimental understandings, which essentially showed that actually animals have different appetites for different key nutrients: protein, salt, carbohydrate, and these appetites compete with one another. So if the animal's in an environment where its diet is imbalanced, nutritionally imbalanced, then it's setting up competition between these different appetites. And the question is, which one wins and what are the consequences of that? And so then we set about trying to understand this issue of balance. What does a balanced diet mean? What are the consequences of dietary imbalance? And to do that, we had to set up a new way of representing responses in multi-nutritional geometric spaces. And you can map nutritional outcomes like topologies, like mountains. And in that way, we were able to show that actually many animals have priorities for particular nutrients over others. And if they're unable to get to their target of, multiple nutrient target, then they will prioritize some nutrients over others. And we found that in many animals, protein is prioritized. And when the animal is deficient in protein, it will consume other nutrients in order to get enough protein. It will also do other things like, in the case of Mormon crickets and locusts, cannibalize others to gain sufficient protein. So protein appetite turned out to be a really powerful process. We showed it in slime molds, we showed it in fish, we showed it in primates, free-ranging primates in Bolivia and in Africa and in Borneo. We've shown it in fish and aquaculture systems. We've shown it ultimately also in people. So we too have a strong protein appetite, and if we're in a food environment where protein is diluted by having too many fats and carbohydrates, then we will overconsume total energy to get enough protein because we have this fundamental appetite for protein. And that led us into the whole field of obesity, human obesity, and the demonstration that actually our food supply is becoming protein diluted through the ultra-processed food industries. So the addition of sugar, particularly sugar and vegetable fats, are diluting in the overall food supply protein and driving overconsumption of total energy. So that's led us directly into issues around global obesity. It also begged another question, which is animals don't like eating too little protein, but nor too much. So are there some costs to excess protein consumption? And that's led us to an entirely new program of research over the last 5 or 6 years, where we've we've started to look at the influence between macronutrient balance, protein, fats and carbohydrates, and metabolic disease, aging and the biology of aging, late life health in humans, and we've found that actually high protein coupled with low carbohydrate in your later years, whether you're a fly or a mouse or a person, is associated with poor health outcomes and an accelerated rate of aging.
Wow.
So we've been able to take these ideas of balance, multi-dimensional targets, prioritization of different macronutrients and other nutrient intakes, and to put them together in this framework, which we call the geometric framework, which has fundamental understandings of the ecology and evolutionary biology of organisms at its heart, and it allows you to simplify really complex nutritional questions and issues and relate them to big biological issues such as aging and obesity and metabolic disease, and also big issues in evolutionary biology and ecology such as life history trade-offs, trade-off between reproduction and longevity is one area that we've used these models. It's also helped us to assist in the conservation of endangered species by looking at their nutritional ecology in relation to their requirements, and show how changes in landscape can actually impact populations of wild animals in ways that you wouldn't understand without thinking about nutrition like this. It's also led us into working with the food industries to help with the reformulation of foods for human consumption, and even into the animal production industries. So we've been working with aquaculture, with poultry producers, with cattle producers, to help understand the management of nutrition of food animals, human food animals. And even another industry we've been engaged with is working with the companion animal food production industries. So cats and dogs are suffering obesity and metabolic disease, as are their owners, for many of the same reasons, and we've been working with the industries that serve them through the production of foods. And it's taken us also into the media. So I've made television documentaries, we have written popular books, very heavily engaged with scientific journalism and communication, because these are fascinating issues for all of us. Yeah. And you can take the best of David Attenborough's natural history filmmaking and you can put it together with big human stories, and really it all came back to being an entomologist as a small child.
So this it's fantastic because it took you back to your roots with your insects.
Yep.
It showed how this is very multidisciplinary,
right,
through not only biological sciences but also into that human aspect of things. But also it also shows that applicability to industry. It shows that global perspective on
yep.
things as well.
That's absolutely right. And if you made a list of all of the expert disciplines with whom we've had to work over the years, either in the nutrition work or in the parallel story, which has taken up quite a lot of my career as well, which is trying to understand swarming in locusts. We've engaged with everybody from molecular biologists and geneticists through to statistical physicists, to mathematicians and computer scientists, to engineers, to people working in robotics, all the way through the more conventional biological disciplines and then out into human health, basic biomedical science, the clinical sciences, and thereafter just about everything you can think of. So it shows, I think, where without taking the well-trodden pathway, well armed with an understanding of core biological principles, evolution, ecology, physiology, you can go just about anywhere and interact with just about anybody to address some of the biggest societal challenges facing the planet. That's a good place to be.
It's a very good place to be. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
That's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.